Medieval India, page number 201, 16.2. The ruling classes, the nobles and the Zamindars. The nobility, along with landed gentry, the Zamindars, formed what may be called the ruling class in medieval India. Socially and economically, the Mughal nobility formed a privileged class. Theoretically, the doors of the Mughal nobility were open to everyone. In practice, persons belonging to aristocratic families, whether they were Indians or foreigners, had a decided advantage. To begin with, the bulk of Mughal nobles were drawn from homeland of the Mughals, Turan, and from its neighbouring areas, Tajikistan, Khorasan, Iran, etc. Although Babur was a Turk, the Mughal rulers never followed a narrow racist policy. Babur tried to win the leading Afghan nobles to his side, but they proved to be restless and untrustworthy and soon defected. The tussle between the Mughals and the Afghans continued in Bihar and Bengal even under Akbar. But from the time of Jahangir, Afghans also began to be recruited in the nobility. Indian Muslims who were called Sheikh Zads or Hindustani were also given service. From the time of Akbar, Hindus also began to be inducted into the nobility on a regular basis. The largest section among them was the Rajputs. Among the Rajputs also, the Kachwahas predominated. According to modern calculation, the proportion of Hindus in the nobility under Akbar in 1594 was about 16% only. But these figures do not give any adequate idea into the position and influence of the Hindus. Both Raja Man Singh and Raja Birbal were personal friends and boon companions of Akbar. While the spheres of revenue administration, Raja Todamal had a place of great influence and honor. The Rajputs who were recruited to the nobility were either hereditary Rajas or belonged to aristocratic families related to or allied to the Raja. Thus, their incorporation into the nobility strengthened its aristocratic character. Despite this, the nobility did provide an avenue of promotion and distinction to persons of humble origin. The nobility attained a considerable measure of stability under Jahangir and Shah Jahan. Both these monarchs paid careful attention to organization of the nobility. The Mansabdari system, orderly promotions, discipline, and the recruitment of competent people into the imperial service. The Mughal nobles we have seen received salaries which were extremely high by any standards. This as well as the liberal policy of the Mughal emperors in matters of faith and the stable political conditions in India attracted many talented persons from foreign lands to the Mughals court. Thus, there was a brain drain in the reverse. On account of influx into India of Iranis, Turanis, and many other in search of service at the Mughal court, a French traveller, Bernier, had stated that the Mughal nobility consisted of foreigners who enticed each other to the court. Modern research has shown this statement to be fallacious. While talented people continued to come to India, many of them rose to prominence in the service of the Mughals. All of them settled down in India and made it their permanent home. Thus, during medieval times as during earlier times, India continued to provide a home to many people who came from outside. But these immigrants rapidly assimilated themselves into the Indian society and culture, while at the same time retaining some of their special traits. This accounts for the richness and diversity which has been a special feature of Indian culture. Under Jahangir and Shah Jahan, the bulk of the nobles already consisted of those who had been born in India. Simultaneously, the proportion of Afghans, Indian Muslims, Hindustanis, and Hindus in the nobility continued to rise. A new section among the Hindus which entered the nobility during this period consisted of Marathas. Jahangir was first monarch who realized that the Marathas were the hub of the affairs in the Deccan and tried to win them over to his side. The policy was continued by Shah Jahan. Among the Maratha Sardars who served Shah Jahan was Shahaji, the father of Shivaji, though he soon defected. Aurangzeb also gave service to many Marathas and Deccani Muslims. We shall discuss Mughal relations with the Marathas in a later section. However, it may be noted that while the Hindus formed roughly 24% of the nobility under Shah Jahan, they accounted for about 33% of the nobles during the second half of the Aurangzeb's reign. While their total number rose to 1.5 times, of the Hindu nobles, the Marathas formed more than half. Although the Mughal nobles received extremely high salaries, their expenses were also very high. Each noble maintained a large train of servants and attendants, and a large stable of horses, elephants, etc. The transport of all types. Many of them maintained a large harem of women, which was considered normal for a man of status in those times. The nobles aided the Mughal emperors in leading a very ostentatious life. They lived in fine houses containing gardens with fruits, trees, and running water. They wore the finest clothes and spent a lot on their table expenses. According to an account, 40 dishes used to be prepared for each meal for Akbar. A lot of money was spent on fruits, the choicest being imported from Samarkand and Bokhara. Ice, which was an item of luxury, was used the year round by privileged classes. Jewels and ornaments, which were worn by men and women, was another costly item. Jahangir introduced the fashion of men wearing costly jewels in their ears after piercing them. To some extent, jewellery was also meant. Another item of expenditure was presents to the emperor, which had to be made twice a year. However, it should be remembered that the value of presents to be given was fixed according to the status of the individual. Also, the nobles received presents from the emperor in return. Although spending, not hoarding, was the dominant characteristic of the ruling class of the time, with only a few nobles remained out of debt and bequeathing large sums of money to their children. The nobility did, directly or indirectly, contribute to the development of the economy. This took several directions. Many nobles bought land or land was gifted to them by the emperor in places where they wanted to settle down and consider it their home. In these places, they developed orchards or built covered markets, mandis, which could bring them income from rent and sales. They also lent money on interest to traders who participated in trade, often in the name of traders or in partnership with them. In a remarkable passage, Abul Fazl had advised nobles to invest a little in commercial speculation and engage in remunerative undertaking. Although usury was condemned by Islamic laws, Abul Fazl told the nobles not to hesitate in investing money on interest, thus reflecting contemporary values. It is not easy to compute the precise share of the nobility in the commercial undertakings of the period. Sometimes some nobles, even royal princes, tried to misuse their position to engross the sale and purchase of certain commodities or to force an artisan and traders to sell their services and commodities cheap. But such instances were not as large as to seriously affect trade, commerce, and artisanal production. The English factory at Surat remarked in 1614 that large and small are merchants. Even members of the royal family, including princesses, and royal ladies, took part in freighting goods on foreign ships and even owned ships for the trade. Mir Jumla, a leading nobleman during the reign of Aurangzeb, owned a fleet of ships which carried extensive commerce with Persia, Arabia, and countries of Southeast Asia. The lure for money from commerce had reached such a stage that even the chief Qazi of Aurangzeb had substantial commercial undertakings which he tried to conceal from the emperor. Thus, the Mughal nobility had a number of unusual features. Though often divided on ethnic lines, it formed a composite ruling class representing different regions and religions, and tried to promote a composite culture by extending patronage to painters, musicians, poets, both of Persian and Hindavi, and scholars. Though essentially feudal in character, since land was its main source of income, it had developed many characteristics of bureaucracy. It was also becoming more commerce and money minded. Thus, the Mughal state and ruling class did not interpose a barrier to the economic development of India. Whether this development could, by itself, have taken India on the capitalist path is speculation into which we need not enter. Our main concern is to see whether there was growth in India and its line of development. Rapid growth in the number of nobility during the 17th century, tensions between different groups, individuals, and sections, and a crisis in working of the Jagirdari system had a serious effect on the discipline and proper functioning of the nobility under Aurangzeb and during the reign of his successors. Some of these aspects are dealt with in greater detail in the subsequent chapter. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. In the next part, we'll start with Zamindars and the rural gentry. Thank you for tuning in. All the best. Do share and subscribe and keep supporting us. Thank you.